and it is a few minutes after 6:30, so apologize for the late start. Jay, if it's okay with you, I'd like to get started.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So those of you with us tonight, welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Chris Nixon. I'm an Efpbc member. Jay Nardone's with us, chair of the Efpbc. We also have Dr. Frank Hackett. He's superintendent of schools in Winchester, and Charlie Hay, who's the architect from TAPE Architects for the Lynch project. Our owner's project manager is Hill International. Andy Vo is joining us tonight. He's our project manager, and he's able to answer questions should we have any. So we're sort of cobbling this together tonight. We've had a couple of community presentations that I think have gone really well. I'm doing this from my car at a hockey parking lot tonight from an iPad, so apologies in advance if I stumble a little bit. What we really wanted to do tonight was, as quickly as we can, give town meeting members an update on where we stand with the Lynch project as some helpful context for two articles that are on the warrant for fall town meeting. We have Article 12 and Article 13, which I'll describe in a little more detail in a few minutes. We're hoping to get through this in maybe 20 or 25 minutes and allow up to half an hour for Q&A. And we also understand there, as is common this time of year, there are many community events that are going on right now. I know there's one tonight involving Swim Winchester and I think another. So if folks feel like they need to be in two places at once, we'll do our best to get through this pretty quickly. So with that, let me see if I can bring up, bear with me. As I'm typing, I'm going to lynch2025.com, which is the project website for the new Lynch. That should load here in a moment. Jay, you see that okay?
I do not. I think I just got bumped out.
Uh-oh.
I've got it. You're up.
You got it? Others see it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, folks, we have. I'm gonna use this as a tool rather than a PowerPoint. But we did this at a couple of community meetings over the past couple of weeks that have been very helpful. I'll turn off my camera here for a moment. Anybody in Winchester should feel welcome to go to lynch2025.com. This is our informational project website where you can learn where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. I'm going to take just a few moments tonight to review a little bit of the process, give you a very quick overview of the website, and encourage you to visit it as we move forward. And then I'm going to hand it over to Charlie Hay, who will give you a little more detail about where we stand on the project. So first of all, this is our homepage. We have on the homepage some key facts and figures about the new Lynch. It has evolved into a three-story a pre-K through 5 elementary school. It's a little over 100,000 square feet, 3 stories, 7 classrooms for preschool. That's an expanded preschool program. We've long been running a wait list in Winchester for years. 5 kindergarten classrooms, and then we have 5 classrooms each for grades 1 and 2, 4 classrooms each for grades 3 through 5, and a number of some support spaces, the specialty spaces, of course. When you visit the homepage, you're always going to find this. This blue banner is intended to be updated pretty much on a weekly basis. Sometimes it will tell you what's going on with the Efpbc, which is our school building committee. Sometimes it's the informational meetings, as you see here. Sometimes it's information sort of beyond what happens within 01890. So along those lines, everybody on the project team is very excited to share that yesterday, the Massachusetts School Building Authority Executive Board voted to review our schematic design submission, which is really the finish line for the so-called feasibility study. The board voted unanimously to approve the project and to invite us into the next stage of work, which is really very exciting. That's really one of 3 steps that we need to take to get moving on the project. The second step involves fall town meeting, and the third step involves an exclusion election on January 7th. So we're very excited about the news coming out of the MSBA, and we appreciate their support. The homepage has a number of tiles. This does not get updated every week, more like every 2 or 3 months, and as you sort of scroll down, one goes back in time. So this milestones or decision points in the project, and it goes way back to when we were evaluating at one point, I think up to 11 or 12 different options on the site. We have a very brief project schedule at the bottom of the homepage, which we have been adhering to. And as you see there, October 26th, that has been updated to reflect that the MSBA unanimously approved the project. And then, of course, Fall Town Meeting opens on November 10th, and we have a couple of articles for consideration of Fall Town Meeting. The debt exclusion override, as I mentioned, is scheduled for January. Charlie will get into project schedule timeline in a little more detail shortly. So in this presentation tonight, I'm assuming that most of those watching being town meeting members are already familiar with the MSBA and our partnership process and why it's important. For those who are not familiar, I encourage you to go to this subpage to learn more about it. There are some direct links here to the MSBA's website. Most importantly, the message here for Winchester is the MSBA is a very important financial partner with us in core replacement projects. We were actually notified in December of 2019, if you can believe it, that we would be entering the eligibility phase in the spring of 20. So that's really when this process started. On the VO project, which was another core replacement project, we were appreciative to get a $10 million reimbursement grant through the MSBA, and on Winchester High School, it was $44 million. And as you'll learn here in a few minutes, we should be receiving about a $17 million grant from the MSBA for the Lynch project. So I won't get into too much detail, but for folks who are interested, you can certainly learn more about it here. I think everybody here tonight is familiar with who the Efpbc is. That is your standing school building committee established by town meeting. The members of the Efpbc are listed here on the right. If they are your friends or neighbors and you have questions about the project, I encourage you to reach out to them. But we've also provided you all some information on the many team members that are participating, and that includes all the engineers and sub-consultants that work under Charlie's direction at Tappe Architects. These are live links that bring you right to these consultants' websites, or in some cases, their K-12 work. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have a project OPM, as is required by the MSBA. That's Hill International, and Andy's here tonight. And there's some information here that gets you to their website as well. And again, a little sort of description about the process and when we started and where we are. So then let me move on to Lynch today. As I think we're all familiar, the Lynch that we have today was never intended to be an elementary school. It was designed as a junior high school. It opened in 1960, substantially smaller than the building that we're looking to build, with significant renewal and replacement costs that frankly don't have a funding source through our usual capital replacement process. We estimate that just in today's dollars alone, the cost to simply fix what's broken or breaking at Lynch would be a little over $43 million. And of course, that's still a junior high school, and it doesn't meet the program needs of the district. We have a site page, again, that I encourage you all to visit. This is a very helpful diagram. Jay Nardone said months ago, I thought very eloquently, the Lynch site is both the largest and most restricted site the Efpbc has ever had to work with. It's over 18 acres, but is extremely restricted in many respects. Of course, we have two unconnected vehicular access points from either sides of the neighborhood. We have wetlands on site at Horn Pond Brook. We've got a connection to the Aberjonah River that abuts the property. The site includes a large play field, and we have significant portions of the site that are either in the floodplain or the floodway. And Charlie, again, will speak to this in a little more detail later. So it's a large site, but very restricted. Town meeting members will remember at spring town meeting, Mr. Fallon, on behalf of the select board, advocated for a transfer of the Wellfield parcel. That's this very large, almost square shape that you see in the middle of the site. This was required for the MSBA to consider approval of the project. They want all the land necessary for this project to be under the control of the school committee. So we appreciated that article, and town meeting voted, I think unanimously, to transfer the land. I am pleased to share that literally Monday this week, we got written notice from Mass DEP that both they and the MWRA had signed off on the abandonment of the well field from an administrative point of view. So that is yet another important milestone and was necessary for the board to vote yesterday. We will always have on this site a very simple site plan. Charlie, again, will go into his in a little more detail. This diagram, if you look very carefully, Below the sort of the white footprint in this red dashed line, you see the outline of the school as it exists today. So it gives you a sense of how what is proposed sits on the site. We have a design page, again, intended to be somewhat dynamic. We describe the overall process of how we got here, the many different options we looked at that we evaluated before we got to this new build option. That included renewal and replacement and many different varieties of expansion and new builds. What we have today, again, a 3-story building. Very brief description here you can certainly go back to if you like, that describes how the building is stacked. Simply our youngest learners are on the first floor, our oldest learners are up on top. We will always keep a few images here as they evolve to kind of give you some ideas of what the concepts are for the interior of the building. We also describe some of our project goals on the design page. Our target is a LEED rated building with a gold rating. The climate action plan voted by Winchester in 2020 is a very important sort of aspirational guide for us, and we said so in the project RFP. We're looking to adhere to the Massachusetts decarbonization roadmap. Institutional buildings contribute significantly towards greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. And so from the very beginning, our presumption was this would be an all electric building. So we're not going to rely on fuel oil or natural gas. And that's an exciting departure from our past as well. Our goal as well is for a zero net energy project, meaning that we are generating on site adequate energy to meet the demands of the building. And we look to do that through both roof and ground mounted solar. And again, Charlie will describe that in a little more detail. That's an ongoing analysis. So for those who have some questions about how we got here, and I won't get into this in the presentation, this is much like the homepage, kind of in reverse chronological order. So as I scroll through here, if you simply go to the bottom of the page, you'll find how we got from 11 to, I think, 6 or 5, and then to 4, and then to 2, and then to 1 in a very sort of simplified format. So what I'm sharing with you here are the many different options that were originally considered as a part of the feasibility study. And that evaluation is actually a requirement of the MSBA as well. So I think I'm going to pause here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Frank, I'll ask Charlie if you can give Charlie permission and he can get into more about what the Lynch looks like today as we envision it. And then I'll wrap up with some thoughts on costs as well.
So for Frank, can I share a screen yet?
Yep, you're all set.
Okay, let's see what happens. I want to go to. Okay, do we see that?
Looks good.
Okay. So good evening. My name is Charlie Hay, as Chris mentioned, from Taipei Architects. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to just walk you through some of the images that have been developed for the project. Chris has talked about them. In terms of conceptual plans, we have kind of a view from the air of the proposed project. And what's useful about this image is for anybody who is a parent or a neighbor or an abutter or is curious, they can really see the project in context. And when you look at the site plan, which is coming up shortly, you'll begin to understand how it's laid out, but you'll begin to see how the building really is now connecting the part of the site to the south, which has the very attractive views of the sort of hill and the woods to the southeast, as well as the existing soccer fields to the north. So it becomes more of a unified campus in terms of the proposal that's being made. And you can see the connections on both sides that are going to remain, one to Brantwood Road and the other over to Horn Pond Brook Road. So here's a site plan, and it shows the building, and as Chris already mentioned, it's being placed to the north of the existing Lynch. And where the existing Lynch is now becomes parking, as well as multiple pickup and drop-off zones, one on the easterly side of the site, one on the westerly side of the site, and then some parking also near Pond Street on the far west. But as you can see, we're connecting to the field. There'll be easy access to the fields in the north, and there will be a large sort of multi-grade, multi-age play area in front of the building, as well as a field for play. And there are outdoor classrooms that are both located on the north side of the building in the rear and on the front and the south side. And there's a dedicated pre-K playground as well, right in front of the pre-K wing for kiddos before and after school, as well as during their school day. So there are, as Chris mentioned, of course, environmental considerations on this site. There's floodplains. We are out of either the 100 or the 500-foot floodplain. There's a wetlands resource area, and there's a riverfront resource area. So we've already begun informal conversations with Conservation Commission, and should the project proceed, those will, of course, become more formalized, and a formal submission will be made. So that's sort of the site plan. And as Chris also mentioned, the sustainability issue, which has been kind of on the forefront of the project in terms of planning. The decision has been made to proceed with solar as a means to generate on-site energy that's adequate to meet the goal of a net zero building. And that will take the form of both roof-mounted solar, as well as parking canopies and roof canopies. And a solar study has just been wrapped up, and it gives us guidance on how to proceed in terms of locations to some degree. But the fact of the matter is, it won't be fully developed till the project proceeds. But the good news is, it's pretty clear to us that we'll be able to generate the kind of production on site that we need to for electricity. How that's procured ultimately will be a decision that's made down the road, whether it's made part of the project or made as a third-party agreement, PPA, later. The plans Chris shared with you to some degree, and there's really not time in this presentation to go into them in great detail, but as Chris mentioned, the youngest learners are on the ground floor, pre-K and K. If you see the yellow boxes on the right, that's our pre-K wing, which is a dedicated wing for pre-K. And that has its own entrance. It also has its own administration, so it has its own controlled entrance. And students can go directly into that area and have their own separate pickup and drop off, which is great. The main entrance is to the left. It acts both as a public entrance and a student entrance. The nice thing is we can zone that lobby and the gym and the cafeteria off really as public functions that could be used evenings, weekends, and the like. And the rest of the school could be closed off, which was sort of part of the kind of mission statement of the school. And the gym is in the rear, that large green box, and it has a platform for performances and the like. Music is also on the first floor. On the second floor is sort of our lower elementary grades, so 1, 2, and 3. First grade gets its own kind of zone, its own pod, and second and third grade become sort of a team above pre-K. This is also the floor that has art and media, which are on your left. And again, the public could actually come up the main stair and arrive at art or arrive at media without going into the rest of this classroom wing. And so that, again, if you had a public function in the evening and you wanted to use the media center for a meeting or for a presentation, that would be, or for adult ed, that would be an opportunity. If there's some sort of an art show that a parent wants to visit, they could come up the stairs and go to the art room without going into the rest of the building. So the public function of that main lobby is actually a 2-story kind of connection. Special education is in the orange boxes, and that's distributed evenly throughout the building. On the top floor, we have basically upper elementary. The pink classrooms on the left are our 4th graders. The right-hand purple boxes are our 5th graders. The 5th graders get kind of a nifty setup because they're right adjacent to potentially to an outdoor classroom, which is on the roof, which will probably be covered with solar panels as a canopy, which gives it some protection from sun and the like. And it becomes kind of its own little academy. But you see those wide classrooms, and you'll see images of this in a minute. You see those wide classrooms in front of wide corridors in front of the classrooms. They act not only as a place for cubbies, for kids to put their their coats and backpacks, but it also acts as another kind of teaching zone where there can be one-on-one or small group learning going on outside of the classroom. So it gives the school some flexibility. There's also a STEM lab on the upper floor that will be used by all students. There are images of the exterior, and of course this is early days, but here's sort of a view from again, somewhat from the air, of what the building from the front might look at. But what's significant about this image is that you can begin to see the scale of the site and the fact that we do have quite a large swath in the center of play area, which is really great and is obviously a marked difference from what happens at the Lynch now. And one of the things we heard early on in the planning, which was the desire both by parents and educators and community members to take better advantage of the site, kind of connect the building more to nature and more to outdoor play and to more to outdoor learning. So we're hoping that we can accomplish that in the way the site plan is being developed. There's another view. You can see some buses there. Here's the rear, and again, from the air, but you can see the soccer fields in the rear and how the fact that the building now basically addresses those soccer fields. So the recreation play areas become much more of a resource for the school during school day, while of course they remain for community use on evenings, afternoons, and weekends. There's a small playground there that can be a kind of multi-generational playground. If one, if a SIB is playing soccer but another SIB isn't, they could go use the playground during a practice or a game. So that's kind of a neat feature that doesn't exist now. And there you can see sort of what it might feel like from the soccer fields. We also have some interior images. This is the rear lobby. And here you can see, right now we're showing the existing mural from the existing Lynch as having been reproduced and placed in the new building, which might be a really fun thing to do. But nonetheless, this is kind of looking out towards the rear, and there's sort of a lower lobby where you go into the gym and there's a ramp. And we're hoping to bring some greenery into the building. Because again, this interest in connecting the inside to the outside and really sort of focusing a little bit on nature and on outdoor education with this building, because we've heard that that's important. But you can see here, turning around and looking up, you see the art above, as I mentioned previously, the opportunity to go up there and have community and academic use up there. Here you're sort of on the bridge looking down at the lobby and also looking up to the upper floor and then down the hallway towards our kind of lower elementary zone that also includes, as I mentioned, media center and art on the right, some art display there in the hall. Here is a cafeteria picture, and the cafeteria should be full of light and a very pleasant place to be. It's also right there at the entrance, which is great for community use as well. This is sort of the early learning corridor, and we hope ultimately to develop sort of themes using color and graphics that sort of identify various areas for students for wayfinding and for just a sense of place and a sense of kind of being part of one team or another within the school. This is sort of the second floor, the same idea, but you can see this sort of concept of having breakout spaces outside of the classrooms where students can learn as well as classroom space, but also out in the corridors. And we've done this in a number of schools very successfully. And again, it's also, of course, functions as a cubby space for students. Sort of standard classrooms with plenty of light, plenty of teaching walls, and plenty of storage. And that is sort of the kind of images we've developed so far. They will continue to be developed as the design proceeds. As Chris mentioned, I was going to talk very briefly about schedule. And this is a hugely simplified schedule, of course. But if you look at 2023, which is the sort of center year there, you see design and bid documents. So if the project passes, as of course you all know at town meeting, we will proceed into design documents with the intent of bidding the project next fall and having a contractor on board by the end of 2023. If that's the case, then construction would occur in 2024 and into late into the summer of 2025, so that the new Lynch would be ready to be moved in for the summer of 2020 late on. September. Of course, I think, as you probably most all know, the intent is to move students out of the Lynch and off-site during the course of construction. So students will be being relocated to the Parkhurst site for the extent of construction. The intent there is to have that happen by fall of 2023, and the students would be at the Parkhurst for two school years. There is a dashed line there you see in the beginning of this kind of relocation bar. That's simply a hedge. If anything should happen, there is a backup plan, which is just to move students a little bit later in the year. It's not the intent, and the intent is to move forward with getting kids into the up and running at the Parkhurst in the September of 23. And that, I think, are the full extent of my slides. So I will stop sharing.
So Charlie, it's Chris. Before Ashley, I'm going to ask you to share one more time. That last slide is perfect to sort of graphically underscore a point. In a few moments, we're going to talk about Articles 12 and 13. Charlie, are you able to share that again and just bring up that schedule slide?
Yes, I should be able to. There.
Great, thank you. Yep, got it. So this is as good of a time as any to explain that town meeting, I think it was in the spring of 2020, at the request of school committee, approved and funded $1.5 million for the feasibility study and schematic design for the new Lynch. That's that very pale bar you see on Charlie's slide to the left. Well, the good news is we did not spend nearly that much money. We spent right around $977,000. That leaves us with about $522,000 unspent. The language in that article in the spring of 20, however, was very narrow. It sought permission to spend up to $1.5 million only on the feasibility study and its schematic design scope and nothing more. Communities, when they get to the stage we're at, where they've wrapped it up, as we have, and the MSBA has approved the project to go forward, when they have a balance remaining from that early funding, they are welcome to use it. Many other communities, in making that initial appropriation, use language that might be, let's say, a little more vague, a little more broad, or all-encompassing of the project compared to what we do. In Winchester, we tend to be very careful and very specific about our wording. So we have an opportunity here that has been reviewed and approved by the MSBA, and that is to go to fall town meeting under Article 12 and basically broaden the scope of work for which that $1.5 million was eligible. If fall town meeting approves Article 12, we will be able to take $522,000 and basically keep Charlie and Hill and the project team moving. So that second purple bar you see in the middle in 23 that says design and bid documents, notice that bar starts right after town meeting. You see the yellow circle for November 10th. If Article 12 should not pass, it doesn't stop the project. Of course, we require Article 13 and the bonding to move forward. But on the Vincent Owen project, when the team was at a similar position, they basically kind of packed everything up and folded their hands for a while. We had to wait for the debt exclusion override to pass. That's what would happen here. So without Article 12 passing, it basically pushes the design work that Charlie is showing to, mid-January at the earliest, and more likely late January. In approving Article 12, we would not be, and this is an important point, we would not be increasing the project budget. We're only going to get an invoice from TAPE Architects once for early design development. It simply allows us to keep the process going and kind of claw back some time we lost with the MSBA early in eligibility. So sorry if that was a little clumsy as I worked my way through it, but I thought this was as good of a slide as any to show that. So Charlie, if you don't mind, if you can stop sharing, then what I'll do is I'll bring back the website for a moment, and we'll wrap some of this up. Okay, so Charlie mentioned the need for swing space. We do have the swing space traffic and safety page. I hope somebody can see that. Give me some affirmation. Does that work for you, Frank or Jay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So right now, the page is simply a summary of where we were at Springtown meeting. Many of you on the call tonight will remember we brought forward two options. One was to renovate the carriage house, move central office there, and free up Parkhurst. The backup option was to bring in modular classrooms. The carriage house option did not pass. And so right now the team is working on that backup option, which are the modular classrooms that Charlie described. We don't have a lot of detail right now. The team is working on that, but when we have detail, this is where it will go. But for those in the community who maybe have concern about swing space, a brief description of the history and how we've done it in the past, including for both VO and Ambrose, we did use Parkhurst, as many of you are aware, and a brief description of that school. So we'll continue to populate this with more information when we're ready to do it. Anybody who cares to sort of go back and watch Efpbc meetings, you can do so. We have maybe not all of them, maybe 90% of the meetings that are here. We thank WinCam for that, as well as some presentation materials. We had a community meeting at Winchester High School on the 17th last week. That's here as well. A little more detail in that presentation. So I would encourage people to certainly look into that if they're interested. I forgot to mention something on the swing space and traffic safety. This is an important point. As some of you may be aware, the select board voted a policy in 2018 to evaluate traffic and safety improvements, not necessarily immediately connected to a school expansion project, but adjacent to it. Particularly when it's driven by enrollment growth, which was sort of the case here with Lynch. So the best example of this is the complete reconfiguration over at McCall Middle School of Washington and Main Street in front and the narrowing of Mystic Valley Parkway. So similarly here, the select board came to Springtown meeting and got funding to start that process associated with the Lynch project. They've hired the same traffic engineer, Tool Design. They've done some preliminary conceptual work on both sides of the Lynch project, both on Lake Street and the Horn Pond Brook side. They presented some conceptual recommendations to the board 2 or 3 weeks ago. Management has been reaching out to the Lynch community. I think there were Zoom meetings last week to get the community's feedback. I believe they'll be reaching out to TTAC if they haven't yet already, and then coming back to the Efpbc and school committee. This scope of work, once it gets baked, is not technically part of the Lynch project, but certainly important to the community as well as the Efpbc and the school committee. And my understanding is that the board may be coming back in the spring to town meeting with a report on exactly what this involves, what it entails, and what it costs. So to the extent we have more detail to provide, this is where we will do it. A common question we get, I have to put in a plug, is this is all great about Lynch, but what about Morocco? This is actually a pretty popular page on this website, we understand from the analytics. So I would just remind town meeting, you previously approved $3.6 million to extend the life of Morocco until we could get a replacement between 28 and 2030. That work is ongoing. The modular gas-fired boilers have been replaced. They're running great this fall. The roof repair and replacement project is underway. We have masonry repairs going on right now. So it's exciting that that work is ongoing, and we appreciate town meeting's support for that. So then I'm going to go right here to what I think many people are interested in, and this certainly bears on Article 13. Article 13 seeks, town meeting needs to approve the bonding authorization for the project. So let me just very quickly summarize for you, and I'll turn this just vertically here. This may be a little easier for people to read in case the margins get a little messed up. Okay, so for construction costs for the new building that Charlie just described, the construction cost estimate is just a little over $65 million. But that's not all of the costs that we envision on the project. Our total project budget is between $94 and $95 million. As I said earlier, we anticipate an MSBA grant a little above $17 million, and therefore a net project cost of close to $77 million. That's, of course, if we spend every dollar of the budget, and our hope is that we don't have to do that. A common question is, okay, so what does that mean to me as a taxpayer in Winchester? So we're estimating right now around $55 per $100,000 of assessed value. I'm going to scroll down for a moment and talk to you a little more about where that comes from and what that means. So the select board ultimately will make the decision. The town meeting will authorize bonding, but it'll be the select board's decision with input from management as to whether this is a 30, a 25, or a 20-year bond. The timing of the bond, of course, matters given we're in a inflationary period and the Federal Reserve, throws basis points like gas on a fire here recently. So a consultant that works very closely with the town on projects like this has estimated a 30-year bond at 5% with majority of the funding sought in the spring would drive the cost that I just described to you above. And therefore, against a average home value in Winchester of $1.26 million, that comes out to just under $700 a year. So I wanted to sort of wrap that up very quickly in terms of what it costs taxpayers. I'm going to scroll up, though, just for a moment to explain how we get to that larger number. So the new building that Charlie described comes in at just over 65 million, but of course we need to abate and tear down the existing Lynch. We're putting $500,000 in permanent upgrades into Parkhurst. That's not throwaway work by any measure, so we consider that construction cost. Our project budget is around $5 million for the modular classrooms and site work necessary to support these kids for a couple of years. We have $7.5 million in construction and owner contingencies, a little over $9 million in design and management fees. We, of course, have fixtures, furnishings, equipment, educational technology to the tune of nearly $3 million, and a whole host of testing that comes, utility fees and other costs. The MSBA also requires us to roll into the total project budget the cost of the feasibility study. So you see an asterisk there, that $980,000, that's the money we've already spent that I mentioned to you earlier under Article 12. So we're not going to spend that twice, but that's how we have to account for it. So our total project budget, again, if every dollar is spent, comes in at just over $94.5 million, less the MSBA reimbursement we anticipate. We would expect a total not to exceed project cost of $77 million. I'm going to ask Charlie, I'm going to put Charlie on the spot just for a moment and ask him if he could just take a moment to describe to town meeting members some of the different contingencies we have on the project and sort of what they entail. Would you mind doing that for a minute, Charlie? Design contingency, construction contingency, and so forth.
Yeah, there are a number of contingencies embedded within the cost estimate itself is a design, and that's part of the quote unquote construction cost, which of course right now is an estimate only, but embedded within the estimate itself is a design contingency. Also embedded within the construction cost is a kind of multiplier for escalation, because as we all know, anybody on this call knows, the economy has been, feeling all kinds of inflationary pressure, and nowhere greater than the construction industry where pricing has been very high and most projects have been coming in considerably over budget. And we're trying very hard to control that with a lot more knowledge than projects had 6 months ago when they were trying to plan to go to bid. We obviously now have a little bit, kind of a little bit of perspective on where the construction market is going, it seems like. But so there are embedded within our estimate contingencies. In addition to that, there is a construction contingency, which on this project is very robust, again, as a hedge against the uncertainty in this marketplace. And then further, there is an owner's contingency, and the owner's contingency is really intended to cover kind of cost, the possibility of cost increases in what is usually defined as soft costs for a project. And soft costs are really all the things that aren't in the building. So, furnishings and fixtures, as well as, of course, the swing space that Chris has mentioned, and fees and design and management fees, technology, those kind of costs. So we have a multitude of contingencies, but as entirely consistent with industry standard on any of these MSBA school projects, and with a real weather eye here towards the kind of uncertainty we're seeing in the marketplace.
Thank you for that, Charlie. And as I as I shared with the high school presentation last week, there are some encouraging things on the horizon, but there are far more things that are just impossible to judge right now. Raw materials have returned some time ago, actually, to their pre-pandemic state in terms of costs. The cost of lumber has fallen, I think, 70% since March. It is now at or below pre-pandemic levels. So that's encouraging, but what we don't really know yet is how do those drops in cost really manifest themselves when the bids come in. Now, we're not bidding this project tomorrow, as I think Charlie has said eloquently in the past. We're barely 25% along in terms of design. The images that Charlie shares look very finished, but really the project is not. So there's a lot of time yet to go. There's certainly a lot of current and I think ongoing concerns about lead time for long lead items, supply chain interruptions, and of course it takes people to build a building. So you need labor, you need specialized labor in many instances. And so these are all things that certainly concern us. They concern a lot of people in the industry right now. And it's honestly sort of one of the reasons why I think Article 12 is so important for town meeting, so that we can just keep the pedal to the metal and keep going, keep designing this project. And if we should discover something is unavailable or substantially delayed, maybe it gives us time to sort of to pivot, if you will. So Charlie, thank you very much for that. I'm going to bring up, I want to remind everybody here, we do have an FAQ page. Anyone can send an email to Lynch 2025FAQ@gmail.com and post a question. Frequently asked questions get posted here on the website. A member of our communications team will absolutely be pleased to get back to you. We have a media page when things come up that are sort of interesting and relevant in the project, so we keep that updated as well. What I'm going to ask Dr. Hackett, do you mind at this time, could I ask you to share screen? If you could pull up Article 12 and Article 13 for me. We can just briefly review that with everybody. Is that okay? That's great. Thank you very much. So town meeting members, the warrant has gone out to print. This is how Article 12 and 13 appear. Article 12, as I mentioned, deals with that feasibility funding. We do reference Article 9 from 2020 spring town meeting. What we're seeking to do is to expand the scope of the purpose of that original appropriation so that we can tap into what remains of that $1.5 million to keep Charlie and his team going. And once again, we're not increasing the project budget. We're only going to do this work once. If Article 12 passes, it allows Charlie and his team to get on it before Thanksgiving. If it does not pass, we're going to be waiting until early 2023. Article 13, though, is really the main event, and that is to see if the town will vote to appropriate the money through bonding to fund the construction of the project. This is standard MSBA language, and I'm pleased some town meeting members are here with us tonight because they require that we include here towards the bottom of this article, you see reference to 36.21% reimbursement rate. Got to be very careful when we talk about this. This was required by the MSBA. That is a reimbursement rate of what the MSBA calls eligible expenses. Not everything is eligible. The MSBA only reimburses for 8% of site costs. They have a cap on construction cost per square foot for general construction. There are some program elements that are not eligible for reimbursement. And it's really quite a convoluted process. But when one actually runs the numbers and simply says, okay, when the MSBA evaluates our program and decides what's eligible and what's not, we wind up with a net reimbursement overall that's actually under 20%, but again, close to $17 million. You will find more information in your mailbox soon. Of course, there'll be a motion that accompanies these articles as well as a detailed background. So thank you, Dr. Hackett, for sharing that. I think that wraps up our presentation. What we were hoping we could do tonight was invite members who are watching. If you have questions, I believe Andrew Marin, our ops director, has set up the Q&A function through Zoom. We would ask and we welcome questions or comments through the Q&A function. If anyone does have questions, we would just ask that you indicate your precinct number when you're writing in a question. I think, Jay, you were going to try to monitor that, and depending upon what questions we get, and I realize we're springing this on everybody, but if folks do have questions or comments, please go ahead and use the Q&A function, and Jay Nardone will kind of figure out who to throw the question to, whether it's our architect or our OPM, our superintendent, and so forth. Frank or Jay, do you have any thoughts, anything that Charlie and I missed tonight?
No, I think everything's well. I mean, it's been the third or fourth presentation, so I think you got all the bugs out of it.
Agreed. Very thorough.
Excuse me. I don't
So
see
we'll
any
hang here. I
questions.
think we can hang here for a couple of moments. The Q&A, if you click on the Q&A function in your Zoom window, you should be able to type in any questions or comments. And again, you can always use the Lynch 2025 FAQ at gmail.com as well. And I think I mentioned earlier, we did hear Monday from Mass DEP. So that's right. Mass DEP and MWRA have both sort of signed off on the wellfield transfer. So we're happy that is sort of out of the way as well. Not seeing anything yet in Q&A. We can hang out for another moment or two. So it is 7:20. I was hoping we'd be done by 7:30. Why don't we do like a last call for Q&A? If we don't get any in a moment or two, we can say thank you. Andy, are we good from sort of project management point of view? Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share?
No, I'm good. I think you cover everything. I think the most important is that the MSBA approved the project yesterday at the MSBA board meeting, and thank you.
Great. Appreciate that. Got a nice note from one of our resident superintendents in Winchester, from Kathy Bodie. Kathy, we appreciate that very much. The MSBA vote was unanimous, and while we have a couple of minutes, I will share. I know some folks are concerned, just as the cost of everything is going up. We see it at the grocery store. We're seeing it on projects, and the MSBA is seeing that as well. The MSBA board actually voted yesterday unanimously to temporarily suspend their accelerated repair program. That's different than the core replacement program. Accelerated repair, and we've participated in it before, in fact, at Lynch, is a program that's meant to help districts with urgent building system or envelope repairs. That includes new roofs, window replacement, and HVAC projects. The Lynch school we have today was re-roofed, I think, back in 2010, 2011, and the MSBA participated with us on that, which was appreciated. But they actually voted yesterday to suspend that program for 2023 so that they could instead bank those dollars and be sure that they're available to meet their obligation with districts and core replacements. And that makes, I think, was it Andy, was like $73 or $76 million available by sort of stopping that program for 23, as I recall.
I think it's about 76 million.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sort of done stalling and spinning wheels, but I know Q&A works because Ms. Bodie gave us a comment. So why don't we wrap it up?
I agree.
I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Frank and Andrew, for helping us out with the Zoom presentation. Thank you, Charlie, for joining us and for your words tonight, and Andy, for you being here.
First.
So I think we should sign off unless anybody has any other comments.
I agree. Have a nice night, everyone. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you at Fall Town Meeting, November 10th.